Today we're going to talk about the sheer crushing power of the atmosphere and what a vacuum can do. We're going to talk about vacuum packing small bags. And there are some separate considerations to take when you're trying to vacuum pack small bags. And we're going to talk about how chopsticks can help you accomplish a great deal when it comes to vacuum packing your bags and overcoming some problems that I've discovered with the methods that we have talked about before. With that, I'm Evan Rowell, and this is Critical Thinking. All right, not too long ago, I was sitting down here thinking about my vacuum packing and my freeze drying and my food storage and everything, and it dawned on me that all my focus had been on freeze drying entrees and lunches and meats and stuff like that. And I got to thinking, what about breakfast? What am I going to do for breakfast? Now, I've come up with a method, or at least a system, which I call your breakfast buckets. And I'll talk about those in another video. But as I was thinking about that, I started thinking about, I don't have any real breakfast drinks vacuum packed away. And if any of you have ever left a can of chocolate or, this Pero or any of this other stuff out for any length of time, it'll absorb moisture out of the air. And so it would behoove you to, to put it in an airtight container. And for me, that means putting it in a Mylar bag and vacuum packing it down. So I thought, well, this will be simple. I'll just go out and get a bunch of stuff. You can get 2 years worth of stuff for next to nothing. So I went out and I got some Tang, and my wife and I, we don't drink coffee, but I enjoy Pero. And I got 2 or 3 of these canisters of Nestle's chocolate, and this one canister right here of the strawberry. And I figured, well, we'll just go ahead, and why even take this out of the canister? All you got to do is cut a, I used a razor blade and I cut a slit in the top so that the vacuum, the air would escape out of this thing, and I would just put it in one of these Mylar bags. And it fit very nicely in that Mylar bag, and so I figured, well, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the freeze dryer to vacuum pack the bag. And oh my goodness, the things that I learned about the power of the atmosphere in that freeze dryer. You see, what I did was I was even able to, this is the smaller of the 2 size bags that Harvest Right offers. And in the larger bag, I was able to put a container about this size filled with the flavored milk substitute, or whatever you want to call it. We don't drink a lot of it, but I figured, okay, I'll put 2 or 3 cans of it away. And what I did was I opened it up, and I haven't done this one yet, but I opened it up and it's got this seal on it, and I poked a bunch of holes around that seal, and then I went ahead and just put this back on, and I put it in the bag and set it up and went in and vacuum packed it in the freeze dryer. And let me show you what happened. Initially it was okay, but when I took it out and held it, check this out. The vacuum in that freeze dryer, drying it down to 3,500 millitors, was so intense that it crushed the container. Now, granted, it's just a cardboard container, but that's pretty heavy and pretty stiff cardboard. It does have the metal ring around the top, and it literally crushed the container. Now, I'm not going to repack this. There's no point in it. There's no point to it because, it's vacuum packed and it'll sit. But it's going to be a constant reminder to me about being careful about how much vacuum I draw down on some of the stuff that I'm vacuum packing. Now, I thought, well, maybe this container, I won't have to worry about that. And being hardcore about vacuum packing, look at this. Same thing happened. It literally crushed this container. And I don't know what to say. I really didn't realize how much pressure we live under on the face of the earth, and what the difference in that pressure can do. But it literally crushed this down to, it just smashed it. And then the same thing happened with my peril. Let me see if I can find the peril here. Here we go. I did the peril. The peril again is in granted it is in a slightly thinner cardboard container with a plastic top, but it crushed it right down to the only thing keeping this thing from becoming absolutely flat was the fact that it has peril in it, and it crushed it right down to there. So the question I come up with is how do I prevent this from happening? Am I just not going to use my freeze dryer anymore because it crushes too much? And this answers a question to one of my followers that asked me. She says, Evan, what about some of my my tomatoes and some of my other more delicate products? Is it going to crush it down into powder? Well, apparently, if you draw too much of a vacuum across it, it will. It'll literally crush it down. So I come across this idea, and I says, well, I've been drawing this vacuum down to 3,500 millitors, okay? And here you can see the pressure that I've been drawing it down to. And I thought, well, what happens if I don't draw it down to 3,500 millitors? What happens if I draw it down to 150,000 millitors? And so I gave that a try. And in that second canister of chocolate, it worked. It vacuum packed it very, very well, but it didn't crush the canister. So the secret there is knowing what you're trying to vacuum pack and how far down you should draw the vacuum. Because this was, I believe, was about 130,000 millitors. And it vacuum packed it. It vacuum packed it very well. And the same thing happened with, let me see here, the other thing of Tang. It vacuum packed it down very tight, very well, and but it didn't crush the canister. This was at 120,000 millitors, and so that's an advantage in two ways. 120,000 millitors makes it so that you can vacuum pack something very, very well, and then you don't have to wait for it to get down to 3,000 or 3,500 millitors. Okay, but there are some things that I still draw the vacuum down that tight, and I'll give you an example of that. Here is some Krusty's pancake mix that I've added raw egg and whole milk and blueberries to, and put it in this package. And I vacuum packed it down to 3,500 millitors. And that puppy is just rock hard. Again, the physics of the whole thing, the pressure on the outside versus the pressure on the inside, and what we live in as far as atmospheric pressure goes, is just amazing. I don't think people realize just how much pressure we endure, but because our internal pressure is equal to our external pressure, we don't feel it. But if you ask anybody that's involved in diving and ask him what the bends is, he'll be more than happy to tell you that the bends can be deadly if it's not taken seriously and not handled properly. So anyhow, there's that, and I did some of the Pero here is not in the can, and I vacuum packed it in the freeze dryer, and it vacuum packed it down just as hard as can be. Now the question that I'm going to have to see is after when this is ever opened up, is the vacuum on this so tight that it's going to turn that flour into a solid brick. I don't know. I'm just going to have to experiment with it, but there's no give in that at all. Okay, so that vacuum pack, or that freeze dryer, has the ability to vacuum pack down extraordinarily well. And you're going to have to pay attention to that depending upon what you want to freeze dry or what you want to vacuum pack in your freeze dryer. If it's delicate, or if it's something that will not withstand the extraordinary pressure of a 3500 millitorr vacuum, you need to pay attention to how much you're drawing it down. Okay, so with that, let's move on to small bag vacuum packing. Now, a lot of people, they tend to not realize that, you know, the easiest thing for you to do is to make your own small bags if you want small bags. Now, the only reason, I think this is about, this vacuum, this size bag right here, is about as small as I regularly use, except for one thing. I will use an even smaller bag for herbs and spices that come out of my herb garden. And my wife and I, we've got a greenhouse and a really nice garden in our backyard, and we grow all of our own herbs. And when we do that, we use 7mm Mylar bags. And I got frustrated because sometimes I was putting a large amount, or a small amount I should say, of herb into, you know, a bag that was too big, until it dawned on me one day that I can go ahead and make my own bags. And what I do is I'll take this 7mm Harvest Right Mylar bag and I will make smaller bags out of it. And how I do that is I'll fold this up, I'll fold this over just to make a slight crease in it. It doesn't have to be a lot, so that I know where the middle of the bag is. And then I'll come over here and I'll lay that crease along the edge of that impulse sealer and I'll seal it down. There you go, okay? So now I have two bags and they're hooked together. Now this end of the bag is open. So when I cut this off, I'm going to want to cut on this side of the impulse seal so that I have two bags. All right, now here I go like this. And now I've got one bag, it's a half size. And I've got another, actually I got two bags that are now half size. Now, sometimes in my spices, I want an even smaller bag than that, and I still want the 7mm Mylar bag. So I will, again, I'll draw this in half. And because I'm making two bags out of this, and I'm going to want the top open, I'm going to make two impulse seals on it, one on each side of that fold. So for this one, I'm going to put the fold just on this outside edge of the sealer, and I'm going to make a seal. Okay? And then I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to put that fold at that same spot, only this time the seal will be on the other side of the fold. Okay? So now I've got two bags, they're hooked together. And you know, you could even use these still hooked together, but you know, that would make it sometimes kind of confusing to the user as to which side they're supposed to open up and how they're supposed to do it. So I cut in between those two impulse seals. And now I've got two 1/4 bags. All right, and that, it works really well. So I've got a half here, I've got two 1/4s, and then I even, for some of these, I will even go ahead and I will do thirds. Okay, I'm going to fold this bag into thirds because I want three long, narrow bags. Now, when I seal this, I'm going to seal these two bags. I'm going to seal this end, both of them towards the middle. Okay, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to seal this one with the fold on the outside. Okay, and I'm going to seal this one also with the fold on the outside. So both of those seal marks, or the seal seams, are going to be towards the middle of my folds. Okay, so now I've got a sealed bag here that's sealed on all four sides. 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got this one is actually also sealed on all four sides, but this one sealed on three sides and the end is open. So what I want to do is the one with the end that's open, I'm going to want to cut on this side of the seam so that I have a 1/3 size bag that is open on the end. Now you can use this way, but I don't really like to. I like to have the opening on the top. So what I do with these is I go ahead and I'll seal up that end also. Okay. It's a good seal. Now this is sealed on all 4 sides. I'll simply go ahead and cut the seal off of the top. And that will give me my bag that is long and narrow, and that is going to help me seal the bag up when the time comes when I use my chopsticks. I'll show you exactly what I mean. But now I've got these 2 bags. This one also is open on the end, but I'm going to cut this one off so that it's open on 2 sides, this middle piece, so that this one will still have a seal on all 4 sides. You can watch it here. Okay, sealed on all 4 sides. Cut the top off. And again, I've got a long and narrow bag that I can put stuff in. Now this one here, this has got, it's open. And I want to make even some smaller bags. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to seal up both sides of this one. And I rarely use bags this small. As a matter of fact, the only reason I can think of that I would use bags this small is if I wanted to put something that I wanted to, keep away from the oxygen that wasn't food, like coins or jewelry or something like that. Now this is sealed on all 4 sides, and I'll cut this directly in half. And so what I have here now is I've got 2 really small bags. And when you're using a bag like this, you're only going to want to use the bottom 2/3 of the bag, because you're going to need that much flap on the top to help you seal it properly, especially if you want to vacuum pack it. So here I've got all these little bags now that I can use for whatever purpose I need to use them for. Now, moving on, I want to talk about how to go ahead and seal these bags, because it does present some specific problems that you might run into whenever you're sealing. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself here. You've all seen me use my little vacuum pump and my needle, my injection needle that I've repurposed to become a vacuum needle. And you've seen me use it with these bigger bags, cutting off the corner and sticking it in there, and then sealing the corner again with my impulse sealer. This doesn't work nearly as well as I'd like it to with a bag that's, say, one of my quarter-size bags. That needle is just too big to work with, and so I needed to come up with something else. And what I did was I got to looking around at the box that this all came in, and there was another needle in there, and I want to show it to you here. It's right here. This is a small needle, and you'll notice that bend in there. I put that bend in there myself. You had to put it on my thumb, and you have to be really careful not to kink it. But with a little bit of effort and applying a pressure in different points along the edge there, I was able to bend that into a 45-degree angle. And I'm going to show you why that's important. So I'll take this needle off, and I'll put this one on. Now this needle has 2 small openings in the top, one on each side. It's meant for injecting marinade or whatnot into meat, into smaller cuts of meat. But I use it for vacuum packing small bags. And I'm going to go ahead and vacuum pack something right now and show you how that's done. Okay, I went ahead earlier and I vacuum packed a couple of these. And there's raw eggs in here. And you'll notice that I have an elongated flap here. In other words, there's a section up here that doesn't have any product in it. All my product's down here. This bag's the same way. And I want to vacuum pack these. Now, if you've ever used one of these setups that I've got, you'll notice, if you're listening, that when you pull the needle out, you'll hear this little tiny bit of air will be sucked into the needle, but it will also be sucked back into the bag. And when you're vacuum packing a large bag like that, that's pretty much irrelevant. That's not going to make a difference in the vacuum pack of the bag. But if you're trying to vacuum pack one of these, that little bit of air escaping back into the bag will cause you a noticeable difference in the vacuum in this bag. And so you want to keep that from happening. And so what I've done is I've come up with an idea. And I use chopsticks. Yeah, I said that. I said chopsticks. What I do is after I've sealed the bag up like this, you see I've got a couple of chopsticks here. Just cheap Walmart. I think you can buy 24 of them in a pack for like $3. But what I did was I took the chopsticks and I laid them one on top of each other so that the bows would open up in this end so that when they're closed, they clamp down pretty good. And I put a little bit of 2-part epoxy on there, and I put it together. And then I took this heat shrink, this electrical heat shrink. Now this is heavy heat shrink. It's rated at 600 volts, and it's big enough that it'll fit over the end of these chopsticks. And so after I put after I put the epoxy on the chopsticks, immediately, I didn't wait for it to dry. Right away, I went ahead and I laid that over the end of the chopsticks like that, and then I put it over a heat source. Now, I happen to have a heat gun that I used, but you can use a gas stove, you can use a candle, you can use a lighter or a match or anything, and that plastic will shrink around those chopsticks, and it will hold them together very, very well. Here's one that's been done. The epoxy has dried. That heat shrink has just absolutely wrapped it together, and as you can see, that is now very well secure at the end. And so what I will do now is if you take that chopstick and you put it in there, and then I take an O-ring, a little rubber O-ring, okay? I got these at Home Depot. You can buy them like 10 to a package. They're not very expensive, but they're heavy duty. And I can take that O-ring and I can slide it over the end of those 2 chopsticks, and I can slide it all the way up to the end, and it'll literally clamp down on this bag. Now all my products is down here. Now there's something else that's an advantage to this, is you can actually pull your bag up and force more product and kind of compress your product down into the bag. But now I've got a nice flat surface here that I can heat seal. So I'll go ahead and I'll cut that off again. Now, because this is small and because it's angled, when I put that in the bag, I find that opening and put it in the bag. I don't have to put it in very far, and then look at that. That bag will just hang there. Okay. Go ahead and turn on my pump. And it will it'll draw the vacuum past these chopsticks. These chopsticks don't hold that vacuum down so tight that you have to worry about it. Yeah, it's putting it down pretty good. Now, if I had that bigger needle in here, when I went to pull the needle out, that little tiny bit of air escaping back into the bag would make, quite a difference to this. And you don't want that happening. So what you want to do is you want to be able to seal this before you pull the needle out, before you turn off the vacuum pump. And because that's at a 45-degree angle there, you can see that. Now I can lay this area right over the top of the impulse sealer with that needle still in it. Seal that down. Now I can pull the needle out. Take those chopsticks off of there. And that bag is very, very well sealed. And I'm not going to lose the seal. Now, this also works. I tried using this method on these 3mm gold bags here with the window in it and everything. I did this about 3 hours ago, and they were tight. And I thought, well, I thought I had a success story here, but I didn't, because these are already losing the vacuum. I don't know what it is about these thin Mylar bags, but they will lose their vacuum, and I'm not sure why, but I'm going to have to repack these. Now, because I've already got these packed in here, I want to show you something else that I can do with these chopsticks that's pretty cool. Here's a half bag. Now I'm going to put both of these. I'm going to go ahead and make a little cut in the top so that I won't have any air left in them. Now, I know you're saying, hey, Evan, salt and pepper, they don't even need to be vacuum packed. You just throw them on your shelf and they'll last forever. And you're right about that. The only reason I'm doing this now is, number one, they lost their vacuum there. And number two, I'm going to show you an example of exactly how I use these chopsticks. So I'm going to take these in there and I'm going to put them in the bag, both of them. And I'm going to show you a problem that you're going to run into with narrow bags that are filled to capacity. And that is this top. Sometimes, now this one's being easy, but sometimes it is really difficult to hold a flat edge so that you can put it on the impulse sealer and you're able to seal it without any wrinkles. And I've come up with gadgets before. I use spring clips and other devices to a certain degree. But I discovered that these chopsticks, and again, because you're using the chopsticks, you can push them down. This is helping me maintain that nice, flat surface on here, to which now I can vacuum pack, or I can seal. And then I normally wouldn't vacuum pack this, but I'm going to do it anyhow so I can show you how effectively that needle on that vacuum packer works. Okay, and there you go. That's a perfect seal. Now let's go ahead and take this chopstick off here, and let's go ahead and use, go ahead and vacuum pack it. Let's see here. Oh, let's see if we get better. With this little needle. And I love this little needle. It works with small bags really, really well. Okay, there we go. And again, that son of a gun is at a 45-degree angle to it. Hold it with my fingers and watch that bag vacuum pack down really well. Now that's using this pump. I'm going to show you how we do this, again using chopsticks, but in a slightly different manner on the freeze dryer. Okay, go ahead and seal that up. And there you have it. That small bag vacuum packed very, very well, and I didn't have to worry about that big needle allowing air to get back in there before I had it completely pulled out. That small needle does a really good job of that. But that's on a half bag. Now, even with the small needle, if you're using a really small bag, like one of these here, then you've got some special challenges, and I'm going to show you how to handle those, again using chopsticks, only in a slightly different configuration. All right, so for this purpose, in this video, I'm going to use one of these small, the smallest bags that I use, and that's a 1/8 or 1/4 bag. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put some of these peppercorns in here. This is for demonstration purposes only. I probably wouldn't even vacuum pack peppercorns. But anyhow, I had somebody ask me a while back, it says, well, Evan, what about somebody that wants this bag because it has a resealable flap on it? Well, I thought, well, okay, let's go ahead and do this. I don't want to pack the peppercorns in the bag because then it would make it difficult to fit into this one. So I just roll a bag up and I'll put it in there. Tuck it right down to the bottom and then dump the peppercorns on top of that. Okay. and I'm able to fit almost everything that I put in there into this one here with the bag on it. Now, I'm able to seal that top, but it's difficult. It's difficult to hold it down, and here's where the chopsticks come in handy again. I'll take this chopstick, I'll put it on there, slide it all the way up so that I got a nice flat seal. Put the O-ring on it, and there you have it. Now I'm even able to pull that up and force those peppercorns and that other bag down into there even further. But now I've got a nice flat surface that I can come along here and seal it. And that is a really good seal. Now, suppose I wanted to vacuum pack it, which I really don't have to vacuum pack this. This is pepper. But I'm going to go ahead and do it just so I can show you again how effective that little needle is. Okay, now that I've cut that, I'm going to want to keep this on here, just making sure that there's nothing above it. Okay, then I'm going to take my vacuum needle, again, one with a little 45-degree angle on it, and I'm going to show you why I'm going to do that here. See, the big advantage to using this chopstick here is it keeps the product from getting up into the area that you're going to want to seal. Okay, so I'll turn on my pump. It'll almost immediately draw a really tight vacuum on there, and you're not going to lose it even if you let go of this. Okay? And now I can take this, I can set it on my impulse sealer, I'll do this one twice. Now I can take this off of here, and I've got a really tight, nice vacuum on this thing, and there was no problem. There was no problem at all. Okay? So with that, I'm going to set that right here. All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and end here. Part 2 is I'm going to show you how I use chopsticks, and particularly these little tiny short ones, when I'm using the freeze dryer. And this works out so very well. It's how I did this one here. And you couldn't get a better vacuum than this, a tighter one. As a matter of fact, I'm concerned that it may be too tight. Is it going to compress that flour down? But anyhow, there's how I vacuum pack small bags. And you know, just for the fun of it, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to vacuum pack these 6 raw eggs here, so I can show you again just how effective this whole thing is. You put that on there, you push it down. Okay. You take your vacuum pump, this little tiny bent needle, stick it in the hole, stick this in there. Okay. Now this one, you'll see, there's a little trick to doing this. If you'll bend that needle down and slide those chopsticks up over the needle, so now you've got the needle down below those chopsticks, and when I turn this on, it's going to immediately vacuum pack that bag, and it's going to do it really tight. Okay? Now, the advantage to having the chopsticks on here, not only does it give you a flat surface to which to reseal things, But when I pull that needle out, now those chopsticks are going to clamp down and prevent any air from making it back into that bag. So watch. You didn't hear any little tiny rush of air, anything like that. The bag is really well tight vacuum. And now I can come in here and seal that off just above the chopsticks. And I have got a very well vacuum packed small bag. Okay, that's why I like to use these tall bags, because it makes sealing them a lot easier, because you're going to have a lot of material at the top. I've got 6 raw eggs in there, and they're very, very tight. I'm very, very pleased with that one. So there you have it. You have to make sure that you watch how much vacuum you're putting on something when you're considering what it is you're trying to vacuum pack when you're using the freeze dryer. It's very, very intense. It will destroy, literally, what you're trying to do. Okay, and so you have to watch it. I recommend, and I have found very good results with drawing the vacuum down to about between 120 and 130 millitories, and that gives you a vacuum pack that looks like this. Okay, you don't have to go all the way down to 3,500. Okay, and in part 2, we're going to go in there and we're going to look at the freeze dryer, and I'm going to show you how I use the chopsticks with the freeze dryer and how it overcomes a little problem that we've had, that I've been noticing using these clips. That even though these clips, as tight as they are, those bags and that pressure inside of those bags will become so great that it will pop these clips off, and I'm going to show you how I overcome that. So with that, I hope you'll like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You're going to want to see more of what I'm doing. I've got several other videos in the pipeline discussing several other things. I've got my breakfast setup going. I'm working on how to do bread. I can do 12 loaves of bread in one batch. I'll show you how I do that. So anyhow, like, subscribe, and tell your friends about it, okay? In this day and age, there are a lot of people, given the political climate we've got and you know, this COVID thing we've got going, there's a lot of people that are beginning to turn their attention to freeze drying and food storage and everything, and that's why I'm here. I'm here to help you learn how to do it. So tell your friends, tell other people about it. I love what I do here. I'm also a professional photographer, and there's my gallery. I hope you'll visit that and tell me what you think. But with that, I'm Evan Rowell, and this is Critical Thinking about chopsticks.